Hey there, it's Russ, and welcome to Financial Planning in Public number 5. Today, we want to continue our discussion where we left off last time, talking about ideal versus acceptable and working towards a balanced recommended plan that gives us enough comfort and confidence that we're not relying too much on the financial markets or on good fortune to make the plan work. But we also want to make sure that we're not so overconfident in the future that we're making sacrificial decisions in our lives today. So it's about striking a balance between living great today as well as being well prepared for an uncertain tomorrow. Before we get into starting to make some adjustments here and seeing the impact it makes on the plan confidence number, I want to first show you a little bit more of what's going on behind the scenes here. And this involves a lot of numbers and math, and I don't want you to get too buried in the details here. I just want to use this as an illustration of what's going on. So this is kind of a behind the scenes look at the Monte Carlo simulation, or the stress testing that we've done with Lillian's recommended plan. Again, remember, it has about 47% confidence, which is why here you can see it turns yellow where this number 47 line is. But what I want to highlight is that given the combination of future potential returns that we look at when we run our stress testing, there is actually an opportunity that if everything goes perfectly right, that Lillian could live to a ripe old age of 95 and wind up with almost $27 million. Of course, the flip side of that coin is down here, she could, now, so this age 100 is not her age. This is actually the 100th simulation that we ran. And in this simulation, she runs out of money at age 76 and is actually almost $3 million in the hole. Now, clearly, she wouldn't go into debt like that. This is just kind of math used for purposes of illustration. And then there are literally dozens and dozens of returns and potential outcomes in between. We don't know which, if any of these, are ever going to actually happen or that Lillian will ever experience. Remember, we're just stress testing her plan to see how her plan holds up in different environments. One thing I do want to highlight for you, though, is the importance of sequence of return and the danger of relying on average returns. So often in the financial advice industry, advisors and other professionals put, in my estimation, a dangerous focus on average returns. And it's not uncommon for them to talk about this mutual fund or this portfolio as an average return of X or Y or Z over this period of time. Therefore, we can use it in your plan because of that average return, things are going to work out fine. What I'm going to show you here is that average returns can often be quite misleading. So what I've done is I've resorted the outcomes of this simulation, and I've actually ranked them by average return. So remember, these are average returns, not the actual returns that were experienced. And if we scroll down here, let me highlight the fact that here is a great example. So I'm going to highlight number 13 and number 26, and I'm going to actually uncheck the rest of these. So if you look up here at this chart and you've got a red line and a black line, my question to you is which of these lines, which each of these represents one path that Lillian's future life could take in terms of her portfolio returns. Which of these has the higher return? Well, if dollar value is over here on the y-axis and we've got her age on the x-axis, you can see that the red line ends up at a higher value, almost $2 million higher than the black line. So clearly the red line had a higher average return, right? Well, if we go back down here to where I highlighted these two, you can actually see that the red line had a lower average return. It had an average return of 8.80%, whereas the black line had an average return of 8.83%. And you might be scratching your head right now saying, well, how can that be? How can an average return, an average higher return, wind up with so much less money? In this case, the black line wound up with just under 2 million, whereas the red line had an end result of over 3.6 million. And it's because average returns can be misleading, because as we see up on this chart, even though the red line had the lower average return, it had their returns in a sequence that actually was more beneficial to Lillian's lifestyle, her spending, her ability to reach her goals. If this black line kind of more or less followed the trend of the red line, but right here about Lillian's age 77, 78, the black series or the black simulation started to go down pretty significantly, whereas the red one kind of moved more laterally or more horizontally. And in this instance, you can see that the end result was a difference of well over $1.5 million. And we can look at other examples and see see a much greater disparity. For example, if I uncheck these two, actually let's leave the red line that we just looked at checked, that wound up with $3.6 million. And let's go up here and find, actually, I'm gonna actually change that. Let's highlight the black one that wound up with $1.9 million. And let's scroll up here and look at something that, number 22. So, all right, so we're still looking at red and black, but now we're looking at two different ones. Now the black one is the one we looked at prior, which was simulation number 26. It wound up with $1.9 million. The red line wound up with 2.4, almost $2.5 million. But in this instance, you can see there's a greater difference. Number 26, this had an average return of 8.83%. Number 22 up here had an average return of 7.4%. So almost 1.5% lower, wound up with what's that? Almost $500,000 more. So again, I don't want to belabor this point. I could go on indefinitely about it, but in the interest of time, just know that it's dangerous to rely on the promise of average returns. It's much more important to consider the actual return experience that you might see in the future, and the sequence in which you receive those returns. And that is what we're stress testing for when we're running this analysis on your financial plan. And as we can see in this example, this is what it looks like in Lillian's plan. So thanks for joining us, and I'll be back to you again soon with more.